Right now, there's a good chance your body is craving alcohol before you've even had a sip today. Not because of habit, because of a switch that got flipped into your DNA roughly 10 million years ago. And once you understand where that switch came from, you'll never look at a drink the same way again. Here's the thing nobody tells you about your relationship with alcohol. You didn't learn to like it. You inherited the desire to like it. Long before humans existed, long before apes stood upright, long before anything resembling a hand could hold a cup, something was already happening on the forest floor that would eventually turn into every bar, every wedding toast, every Friday night you've ever had. So let's go back. Not thousands of years, millions. Picture Africa, roughly 10 million years ago. A small primate, an ancestor so far removed from you that calling it human would be generous, is foraging through the underbrush. It finds fruit. Not fresh fruit hanging from a branch, fruit that fell days ago, fruit that started to soften, split open, and turn slightly brown at the edges. Most animals would ignore it. This one doesn't. Inside that overripe fruit, wild yeast has already gone to work. Sugar is breaking down into alcohol, a low concentration, nothing close to what's in your glass tonight, but enough. Enough that when this primate eats it, something shifts. A slight buzz, a tiny reward, and it has no idea why. It just knows it wants more. Multiply that moment across millions of years, across countless generations, and you get something remarkable. Evolution didn't just tolerate this behavior, it selected for it. Primates who could metabolize alcohol efficiently could exploit a food source that others couldn't touch. Rotting fruit meant extra calories nobody was fighting them for. The ones who liked it survived better. The ones who didn't pass on that indifference. This is the part that should stop you for a second. By the time actual humans showed up, the craving was already installed. We didn't invent the desire to drink. We were born wanting it. But wanting something and knowing how to make it on purpose are two completely different skills. So when did that leap happen? Fast forward to a cave in northern Israel, a site called Raqefet, dated to roughly 13,000 years ago. The people living there were the Natufians, and here's what makes this discovery strange. These weren't farmers. They hadn't figured out agriculture yet. They were still hunting and gathering, moving with the seasons, collecting wild grain by hand instead of growing it. And yet, archaeologists found stone mortars cut directly into the cave floor, and inside those mortars, residue from wheat and barley that had been deliberately soaked and left to ferment. That's beer, brewed on purpose, 13,000 years before anyone had planted a single seed. Think about the order that puts things in. For decades, the assumption was simple. Humans settled down, started farming, built stable food supplies, and eventually got around to fermenting drinks as a bonus. A leisure activity that came after survival was handled. Raqefet Cave flips that completely. These people prioritized brewing while they were still nomadic, while food security was nowhere near guaranteed. That's not a hobby. That's a priority. Now here's where most people get the story wrong. There's a common assumption that early humans were too consumed with survival to plan anything beyond the next meal. Grab food, eat it, move on, repeat. But brewing doesn't work that way. Fermentation takes days, sometimes weeks. It requires someone to gather grain, soak it deliberately, leave it alone without eating it out of hunger, and trust that the waiting will pay off later. That's not a desperate species scraping by. That's a species capable of delayed gratification, long before agriculture supposedly taught us patience. The evidence at Raqefet doesn't just tell us people were drinking, it tells us they were planning. And it gets stranger. About 1,000 years after Raqefet, in what's now southeastern Turkey, something enormous was being built at a site called Göbekli Tepe. Massive carved stone pillars, some over 10 tons, arranged in deliberate circles, covered in detailed animal imagery. This wasn't a settlement. There were no permanent homes here. The people who built it were still hunter-gatherers, the same as the Natufians. So why would nomadic people organize the manpower to drag 10-ton stones up a hill and carve them with precision? For years, that question had no good answer. Then researchers found large stone vats at the site, and inside them, chemical traces of fermented grain, not small batches, enough to serve a crowd. One leading theory holds that Göbekli Tepe wasn't a place people lived. It was a place people gathered, a destination built specifically for large groups to travel to, meet, and drink together, which raises an uncomfortable question for anyone who assumes farming came first for practical reasons like bread and stability. What if it didn't? Archaeologist Patrick McGovern, one of the most cited researchers in the study of ancient fermentation, has argued for years that the desire to brew may have been the actual reason humans started farming in the first place, not the desire to bake. His reasoning holds up. Bread requires grinding grain into flour, kneading dough, controlling heat precisely. It's a multi-step process with a lot that can go wrong. Beer just needs grain, water, and time. Soak it, leave it alone, and the fermentation happens on its own. If people were choosing between the labor-intensive process of bread and the comparatively simple process of beer, and both required the same first step of managing grain in large quantities, it's not hard to imagine which motivation pushed harder. The buzz might have built civilization before the sandwich did. By around 7000 BC, the evidence sharpens into something remarkably specific. At a Neolithic village called Jiahu in central China, archaeologists uncovered pottery containing residue from a fermented beverage made from a blend of rice, honey, and fruit. This wasn't a crude accident. This was a recipe. Multiple ingredients, deliberately combined, refined enough that whoever made it clearly understood what they were doing. It stands as the oldest confirmed alcoholic recipe on the planet. Around the same broad era, over in Sumer, in what's now southern Iraq, brewing had become so central to daily life that it worked its way into religion itself. The Sumerians worshipped a goddess named Ninkasi, whose entire role was overseeing the brewing process. A surviving hymn dedicated to her essentially functions as a coded brewing recipe, describing the soaking of grain, the baking of bread specifically meant to be crumbled into a fermenting mash, and the straining of the finished product. People weren't just drinking beer in Sumer. They were praying over it, teaching it, and passing the process down through structured, almost ritual instruction. And once that threshold was crossed, alcohol stopped being an occasional discovery and became infrastructure. In ancient Egypt, beer wasn't a treat. It was currency. The laborers who built the pyramids were paid in it several liters a day as their actual wage. Not coins, not grain. Beer, that decision made more sense than it sounds. The water from the Nile carried contamination that could make people sick, but the brewing process filtered and stabilized it, making beer safer to drink than the river itself. On top of that, fermentation added calories and nutrients laborers desperately needed while hauling limestone in brutal heat. One drink was doing the job of a paycheck, a water filter, and a meal, all at once. It didn't stop there. The Egyptians wove alcohol into religion, crediting the god Osiris with its creation. It showed up in temple offerings, in burial rites, and in medicine, where physicians mixed herbs into beer and prescribed it for ailments ranging from digestive problems to infections. So here's the full picture. 10 million years ago, a primate on a forest floor developed a taste for fermented fruit, and that taste got written into our biology. 13,000 years ago, people who hadn't even invented farming yet were deliberately brewing inside a cave, proving they could plan and delay reward long before agriculture supposedly taught us how. 12,000 years ago, groups may have built one of the first monumental structures in human history specifically to drink together. 9,000 years ago, someone in China had a refined recipe, and someone in Sumer was writing hymns about the process. And 5,000 years ago, an entire civilization was running its economy on it. Alcohol didn't arrive after civilization was built. There's a real case that it helped build civilization in the first place. Every time you crack open a drink, you're not doing something new. You're continuing a behavior that predates your species, predates agriculture, predates writing, predates almost everything you'd consider human history. The ingredients changed. The process got refined. The containers got fancier. But the impulse sitting underneath all of it is the exact same one that made a small, forgotten primate reach for a piece of rotting fruit on a forest floor 10 million years ago. We didn't invent the desire. We just spent 10 million years learning how to make it on purpose. If you want to dig into the research behind any of this, it's linked down in the description.